Hello Veritas48. This is in response to your recent 5 questions for Atheists video. So I'm going to try to keep this brief and just start with question number 1. If you could choose anything to say to God upon death, what would it be and why? Well, were I to find out that the God of Christianity was real upon dying, I would probably ask something similar to what Bertrand Russell asked, which is more or less why he made a world in which the closer we looked at it we found less and less reason to believe he existed, especially when he seems to consider our acknowledgement of himself so very important. Number 2. What sort of evidence would you find sufficient in order to abandon atheism and become a believer in God? Well, given the context in which you put the video in, I'm assuming that by God you mean something supernatural and not just a synonym for nature or the universe if one is feeling poetic. Well, that would first require me being able to accept that the supernatural in fact exists, which is basically something that is not a part of nature existing, as if that even made sense. If there was anything like God, it would in fact be an ancient peer in relationship to us, or even a parent perhaps, but not a supernatural entity. And any personal God would have to in some sense be born and be as subject to physical laws as anything or anyone else. Now, if a being like that were to try and oppress and dominate us, I'd propose insurrection. For me, it's not simply a lack of evidence which dooms supernatural religions. It's that what they propose itself doesn't make sense. There is nothing to actually oppose in the sense that one is not dealing with coherent claims. Now, your third question: do you think the new atheist movement is ultimately a good thing or a bad thing for freethinkers and skeptics? Well, more than a positive development for people who are already freethinkers and skeptics, I think the new atheist movement is really a positive thing for society in general. There is nothing that the likes of Christopher Hitchens or Richard Dawkins have said which approaches the vile things said with regularity from pulpits throughout the believing world about human beings who happen to not see things the same way as them. Dogmatic religions are a dying phenomenon in the Western world, as scientific and cultural progress proves more and more incompatible with their Iron Age explanations and moralities. This leaves those who are still of such belief systems in much the same situation that people suffering from white man's privilege suffer from in modern society. For you see, just as there was a time not so long ago where most people would cram into houses of worship with great regularity, it was also not so long ago where white males could expect consideration over all others in societies and have privileged access to resources that everyone but themselves did not have. Now, developments with regard to civil rights for women and so-called minorities have attempted, and I think largely succeeded, at creating a more or less level playing field for all. Yet, the subjective experience of loss of privilege that is felt by some, and I emphasize some, white males, tends to be interpreted as an assault upon themselves as white males. Well, I go through the trouble of describing this modern phenomenon because I think many members of formerly prevailing religions wherever they are or whatever they happen to be, are kind of having something of the same problem in the face of modernity. They interpret the taking of their ideas as just being another set of ideas to be dissected and torn apart, as constituting some kind of special injustice, when it's really nothing of the sort. They've been used to a level of deference in being treated with kid gloves, and that's the problem, not the behavior of high-profile polemicists like the men you mentioned, or people like them. Now, question number 4. What sort of decisions are affected by your atheism? Well, the short answer is none. It would really be better to ask me which of my decisions are not informed by religious claims, and the answer for that question would be all of them. Question number 5. What is more important, gaining true beliefs about the world, or not gaining false beliefs about the world? Well, I know in your video you attempt to emphasize the separateness of the two ends you establish, but I reject the distinctions as you've made them. It's impossible to have true beliefs without having mechanisms to avoid beliefs established on falsehood. True or truer ideas and explanations cannot be arrived at without such discrimination. Otherwise, you're not really talking about true beliefs versus not having false beliefs, but rather beliefs of all kinds versus not having false beliefs. I think it was the Apostle Paul who said that it was the heretics, or those with false opinions, who had an appetite for ideas because they tickled the ears. How interesting having a position may be really has no relationship to its credibility.